Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is how to build a GX160R. Today, we're going to be assembling the bottom end. I have everything I need, and then some. Thanks to Grey Goat Garage and my good friends at OMBWarehouse.com. We're going to start by going back over this block and making sure that it is completely clean. You don't have to look far when it's right in the name. I'm concentrating mainly on the bearing and any areas that I had been drilling. There's that galley hole. I had oiled this thing up, and I want this to break that oil down and start to rinse out the oil with any contaminants that might be in it. I'll flip it over, hit it again, and then it's going to get soap and water and rinsed. I just repurposed an old towel on my workbench. Now I have a clean surface for my thoroughly cleaned and dried block. Ain't she beautiful? Now that everything's clean, I want to re-lubricate it with fresh oil. The bearing and the cylinder. I don't have to go crazy. I'm going to be using rags and little bits of oil as we go, but you can see just how fresh everything really looks. Yeah, buddy. It's a good place to start. Now we can install a brand new oil seal. It just has to be flush to the block, so I'll use a piece of wood. There we go. The genuine GX160 crank is next up for the cleaning process. I'll let that foam dissolve, and then soap and water. I like to do all my parts separately. Now the GX200 billet rod is going to get the business. I'll remove the two bolts, the cap, and separate the bearings. Clean everything down, and then take those one step further. Sweet. I just placed the rod between a couple pieces of wood and then set it in my vise. That way, when I'm tightening the vise and it starts clamping together, it doesn't crush the rod. You can see that the wood gives a little bit and forms around it. we're going to be setting the crank in, and we want to make sure that when we do so, the lobes of the crank don't hit the clamps or the wood. I'm going to loosen this up and adjust my rod so that it's sitting a little more level. Much better. Put a couple drops of oil. A little bit on my fingertip. Wipe my bearing off. Get a little more oil on my Ringo there, and I'm just smearing it on the back side of that bearing. The bearing has a little indentation on it that lines up with this little indentation on the rod. See? Just like that. I'll push down. That'll kind of start the seating process. Make sure everything looks clean. There's no metal flakes. Now we're ready for the crank. The crank is just going to sit right on top of that bearing in the same orientation it would be in when it's installed into the block. A little bit of oil on that cap, and then I will install this bearing the same way with those little groove things. Line it up and press it in. I have one of the washers off of these bolts. There's two sides to them. One side has sort of a cup thing going on, and the other side is completely flat. The flat side goes towards the cap. I could actually place it on the cap and then send the lubricated bolt through it. This one, it's there just like it would be from the factory. That goes in. The cap itself has a dot on it. That dot lines up with this dot right here on the rod. Place that on. Careful not to lose my bolts. And I will hand tighten these. Quarter-inch torque wrench, quarter-inch ratchet, and a 12-point quarter-inch socket. Easy to remember, right? Hand tightened means you really want to make sure that both the cap and the rod are meeting up together. Even though you have that dot to help you, you still want to be sure. This one's real nice. This is an inch-pound torque wrench, by the way. My first hit is going to be right around 60 pounds. I'm just shy of 65 there. I'm going to alternate between the two until I hit that 60, 65. So, little bit, 65, and then 65. Alright, so that took me 3 twists per bolt to hit that 65. Now we have to go from 65 up to 150. I'm going to go 80. So I'll start with 1. There it is. Alternate to the other one. Go up from there. I'm going to go for about 100. This one I might do these fresh bolts. A little bit. Notice it didn't click. A little bit over here. This is the juggle. There's 80, or 100 I mean. There's the other 100. I'm going to do the same thing all the way up to 150. I just hit both of my 150s. Now we're going to back both of these off completely loose. That's what the 1/4 inch ratchet's for. You don't loosen with your torque wrench. With both bolts completely loose, I'm now going to remove the cap. I just snipped off about a 1-inch piece of red plasti gauge and set it across the crank journal. Couple drops of oil on my threads, and I'm now going to repeat the same process, except this time I'm going to set the bolts at 170 inch-pounds. Alright, I'm going for the 170. Still juggling. There's one. There's the other. Back these off, and we'll check the plasti gauge. Careful not to spin the crank so we don't screw up our reading. Alright. Both bolts are completely loose. I'll pull the cap straight off. And now I'll grab the plasti gauge itself, wherever it went, and we'll see how we did. There's our mark. 0.003. That's what we're going for. I'd say we're right about there. I wouldn't go any tighter. I just cleaned off the majority of the plastic gauge from the crank journal. I'm going to hit this bearing inside with just a little more oil. It's just going to drip down to the bottom of the block anyway, and we clean it up at the end. And check this out. I'll even put a little bit right on the crank itself. Isn't that nice? Put that up and should be able to go right in place. Word up. I have the connecting rod safely to the side. I just found a fairly new, it's either a GX200 or a 196 wrist pin, and a brand new Honda. This is a UT1 flat top piston. These fit the GX200, 196 clones, and the GX160. Even though it's brand new, you know what's going to happen. Right in the soup. Right onto the rings. I have a random 196 piston, my feeler gauge set for 8 thousandths. I have the crank pulled out. I'm going to stick the piston up into the cylinder and then lower one of these oiler rings down. That way this sits flush on the piston and it'll be compressed inside the cylinder. At that point I'll be able to reach inside with my feeler gauge and make sure that that's my minimum gap. Here it is with the ring pushed up against the piston. The gap is up there. I'll push the piston away from the ring, and now I can carefully measure the gap. I'm in there. The first ring to go on is actually made up of 3 rings. You have this spring ring and 2 small steel rings. The first one to go on is that spring ring. You want to find the end of it and make sure that it is not overlapping. I can tell you right now, this one is not. There it is. Right there. Next, I'm going to install these skinny steel rings. These go under and over that spring ring that is already on there. I'll start one end of the ring underneath the spring ring, hold it with my thumb, and then I'm going to twist around. It's hard to get on camera there. so that I'm not scraping the ring needlessly up against the piston. It should just fall in place. Alright, now I have one under that spring ring. Whoop, the other one's overlapping. You gotta fix that real quick. I'm just holding it with one hand and scooching it with my fingernail. Alright. Got it. Now, I'm going to try to do the same thing with the top ring. You get one side started, and then do the twist. It's on there. We'll get the gaps where they need to be once we have the other two rings installed. The most important part about this one is making sure that that spring ring doesn't get overlapped. If it does, you won't be able to compress them. You'll know. Now that those are on, we'll consider that the bottom ring. The middle ring is the black one. There's a little R on this one. That's going to be facing up. The top ring is the one with the silver face towards the cylinder. It also has a little marking on it. I believe that's an R. Yep. That's going on top as well. All of my rings are on. We're going to orientate them once the piston is attached to the connecting rod. I took the cap off. I have my wrist pin ready to go and my two clips. Lube up the wrist pin. Pay attention to the connecting rod. This side is down. Over on the piston, that little circle right there indicates that it is going down. So we're going to be sending the wrist pin through the connecting rod just like so. I have one of those clips in already over on, it's actually this side. You can see it right there. I'll flip this over, push the wrist pin down, and make sure this other clip is in and completely seated as well. Now I'm going to get the rings where they need to be. We don't want to have any gaps over the wrist pin. The bottom oiler rings don't line up. I have them opposite of each other, and I'm going to turn the other two so that one of them is facing the bottom of the piston and the other one will be facing the top. There it is. Now I'm going to lubricate the rings, the side of the piston, and I'll hit that cylinder again. Crank goes back in before we try to lower the piston and rod down. You have to land it on that journal after all. I'm putting my piston in by hand. To make it easier, I took the top two rings off and then used my sausage fingers to compress the ring while pushing down evenly on the piston. I'm working on the middle one now. Once I get that, I'll carefully put the third ring, the top one, on. Make sure that my letter or marking is facing upward and that my gap is where it needs to be. I actually like doing my rings this way. Now we have to attach the cap and torque that thing home. I'm just hand tight, but I'm making sure, just like I did before, that everything is coming together nice and square. It'll be the exact same process, juggling back and forth between the two bolts to tighten them. I'm going to go to 170 inch-pounds and then stop. This rod is officially installed. I'll put a little bit of oil up on top of the piston. And we'll check our deck height. Yeah, buddy. Now we need some lifters. These are the genuine Honda GX160s. They're used, but they're still very much awesome. Make sure they're lubed up all the way around, and I'll stick them right on in. Before I drop this cam in, I want to take a minute to explain why I'm using this exact one. There's two ways to achieve this result from a GX160. You can use the GX200 rod, which is more of a box stock approach, or you can go a little crazier and you can use a 3/3/8/3 rod with a UT2 piston. This is the UT1. The UT2 has a shorter skirt and a different wrist pin height, so it changes the compression height of the piston in relation to the rod. What's the big thing there? It's something like 15 grams of mass that you reduce from the throw. I didn't even remove the governor gear off the crank on this one. I want this to be very much like a box stock motor. That said, the 212R 196R cam is a mild box stock cam. It has more lift, I would say, and definitely more duration than this stock GX161, where we're going to be pushing even more RPM than stock, and we might be making a little bit more compression in the end. I'm hoping that the profile of this cam is going to work out to something that is very efficient and effective without being overkill and running into tuning issues like needing a much bigger carb. Same journals and everything. Line up the dots, lube her down, and get ready to put the side cover on. I'm just going to hit everything that I can see, and maybe a few things that I can't, but I know are still there. This used, yet relatively robust and good condition 196 side cover already has a brand new bearing installed. This one has two, and seeing as if it is one of the highest quality side covers on the market today, I'm assuming it has a few other features that are going to work to our advantage as well. I've never installed one. I did read over the somewhat lengthy directions, so I have an idea. It should be all of our hardware, all kinds of goodies. I'm going to get this laid out. Well, it's a good thing I take pride in what I do, because this would probably take the wind out of most people's sails. These dowels, well, there's 4 of them. There's 2 different size holes. This doesn't happen on every block, but it does happen on some. For instance, there's a hole that it'll fit. Here is another hole that a dowel will fit. I need one up here where it doesn't fit, and I need one down here where it also does not fit. If you just look at the bore, you can tell that one is bigger than the other. Do this the right way, I'm going to have to drill it out. I can't, in good conscience, do that without taking this all apart. The cam will come out, the rod, the piston, the crank, all that oil, all the hard work I just did is going to come apart. Oil, seal, everything. I'm going to drill those out, make sure the dowels fit in all 4 positions, and then I'll clean everything up and reassemble. It's not going to be as hard because I'm going to take everything apart that's already clean. I'm going to put it aside where it can't get dirty. For instance, pull a little move like that, alright? I'll do the best I can to minimize my efforts, but I am indeed going to maximize my results. I'm going to pop that governor gear off the crank too while I'm there. Other than that, everything's going to be the same. We're not giving up. If you look at the bottom of the factory bores for the dowels, you can see where the tip of the bit went just a little bit further than the rest of it. Same thing happened to me, which was fine down here. Up top, it barely poked through the casting. It looked just like this one. It had just a little pinhole. So, just playing it safe, and I hit it with some JB water weld. I was told that this stuff is what to use around anything where there could be oil or gas. It might be a little overkill in excess, the amount that I put, but I stuffed it on there real good, and then just used my eraser on my pencil to, form it back in there. That way the dowel goes in and out, no problem. I'm going to get this thing back together. It's already cleaned up. Minus the governor gear, the piston, rod, and crank are completely installed. I'm just about to put the cam in, and I noticed this with the lifters. They're bottoming out on the block instead of the lifter boss itself. I'm pretty sure when the push rods are in there and they're hooked up to your rockers and valves and springs and things, that there's downward pressure, and there would be a space here anyway, so that your cam lobes aren't just smashing these off of the casting anyway. So we're going to call it good. The cam is in. The timing dots. That one's hard to see on the crank, but they're lined up. Now we can continue with the billet side cover. I'm going to start by placing all 4 of my dowels. 1, 2, 3, and number 4. I'm just taking a lightweight hammer and giving these a little tap. Just making sure they're bottomed out. This traditional paper side cover gasket is only to be used if you can't get this rubber gasket to work. We're going to stretch this out and install it in this little canal that goes the entire way around the billet side cover. They got this figured out all right. It's very easy to place into the canal. You just follow your turns and don't overstretch it. About a third of the way around. See, I rushed that corner a little bit. I overstretched it. Good thing I didn't cut it yet. I'll peel it back, fix that mistake, look back over the rest of my work, and then when I know it's perfect, I'm going to grab a razor blade and snip that end off so that they're as tight as I can get them. If you didn't know better, you wouldn't even know there was a seam there. Alright. For the shims, no matter what, you have to use the thinnest one. So that's what we're going to start with. I do believe it's this one. Next, I'm going to put the side cover on. I'm going to use 2 hands for this one. It should just bore it over the shaft and line up with the dowels. I'm looking at this one up here and this one over here. Might have to give it a bump with the rubber mallet just to close that gap. I'm on right there, dowel under there, and the other one is up under here. It's definitely closing up. That's all I'm doing. I grab the bolts. I have these tightened with a wrench. We're going to be torquing them to 185 to 200 inch-pounds. We're looking for end play. The recommendation right there. It's not very much. I'll start at 100, work my way around and go all the way up to at least 185. Sweet. I'm at 190 and we have all kinds of slop. You see that movement? That's end play. That's what we're after. We're trying to tighten that up. We want it so that you can hear it quick, but you can't really barely see it move. You can definitely see that rocking and rolling, so Shim City, baby. Even with all the bolts out, this ARC side cover can be a little difficult to remove. There's two small threaded holes and they give you two bolts. One hole is here, the other's here. I already started threading the bolt in. I'll do the same with the other. I'll grab the right size wrench and I'll juggle between the two, tightening it, and it will push the cover away from the block. I have the skinny one and two of the regular shims in there. Try this again. So close. Oh, do I take the skinny one out and just add this one, or just add this one and leave the skinny one in? That's a tough call. This is with all the shims. You might not be able to see it. Well, you definitely won't be able to see it. I'm going to put you up real close and just maybe you can hear it. Anything? It is moving ever so slightly. We might leave it. You're going to take it apart anyway one more time. We have to put a seal in here. Lubricate some things on the inside. At that point I'll take a look at the shims and see if one of them is just crazy thin. If not, send it. Isn't this a delightful little surprise? There's 4 shims, 2 skinny ones and 2 thicker ones. The thinner ones are half of what the thicker ones are. So, if we take one of these away, we'll be right back where I said we had just a little bit too much. If I were to take one of these away and then replace one with the regular shim I have that's the same as one of these, and we ran one thick one and 3 of the thin ones, that would be the same as if we ran 2 big ones and 1 skinny one. So we're going to go with the 4-pack. The only other thing I could try to do, nope, we can't, because if we put the skinny one back in there, that's the same as 2 thick ones and a skinny. Yep, all 4 it is. I installed 2 new oil plugs on the block, and I have one that goes to the side cover as well. Nice new oil seal. The reason I'm putting these plugs in is so that when I lubricate, any residual that falls down to the bottom of the block will stay in there where it belongs, rather than pouring out all over this beautiful towel covered workbench. Lube, lube, lubricate everything that moves. I'm not kidding you either. The cam, the crank, the bearing, rod. I get up in there, squirt some of those lifters. Sweet. Now I can install the side cover. That was definitely worth all the effort. I'm proud of that installation. This thing looks amazing. And it's a big time upgrade for this little engine. This is going to add strength, dependability, accessibility. It might even make things a little bit easier when we have to drain the oil. We'll see about that. The last thing to the bottom end is going to be, the flywheel. To keep it simple, I'm just matching the 212R flywheel to the 212R cam that we're using inside this GX160. This is just the stock woodruff key that came off of this crankshaft. Where they're both used, I probably don't have to lap this on, but I'll hit it for good measure. Real quick, like once over, few twists, clean it off, send it. Lapping this was a great idea. It actually cleaned off the shaft and flywheel a lot more than I thought it would have. After I hit it with the compound, this got the soap and water, and they both got the brake clean. You can't have any of this residual compound on there. You know, you got to consider, if this thing's spinning like 6,500 plus RPM, you're going to eat that seal up with the quickness. I have that GX160 woodruff key installed. I'm ready to go. I just need my crank holder tool and a foot-pound torque wrench. Word to the wise, if you're going to use a Honda starter, get used to keeping the Honda cup with it. A little bit different design and definitely a little bit more heavy duty. This is the one off the Tillotson, I believe, and it'll do. It's not bad. It ain't this doorknob. 54 foot-pounds is a whole lot easier when you have this tool. That's it. No struggling, no messing around. Now we can just bring our piston down just a little bit. Some clean oil in there. Grab a rag. We'll spin the flywheel, and I'm going to try to clean up that little bit of oil, just in case there was any, dust or anything on top of the piston. Oh yeah, that's smooth. We could check this, but I'm pretty sure we're close to nothing on that deck height. The lifters aren't a problem right now, so once we get the head on and some push rods and things going down there, if it doesn't spin for some reason, we're gonna have to remove the side cover again. So I'm not gonna fill this with oil right now. I know some of you are wondering, so I won't leave you hanging. Hopefully this all works out and those lifters won't leave us hanging after we get this head installed. It's always something. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.